Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Outdoor Adventure Lab. My name is Zan Zerbel, and for anyone who's new to the lab, this is where we have conversations with a wide range of adventurous individuals to educate, stoke, and inspire. In today's episode, Marshall Yanzik and I speak with Beau Eastes and Brock Dittus as they share their bike touring adventure stories, as well as tips, advice, and wisdom, and how the cycling community can support diversity and inclusion. And with that, on to the show. Our first guest is Brock Eastes. He's a freelance beer and bike rider out of Bend, Oregon. Regularly contributes to the travel magazines 1859, 1889, and OnTrak. Beau's ridden some of Oregon's best bike touring routes, most notably the Oregon Outback Trail. With a soft spot for coffee stouts, old forest roads, and historic fictional novels, it's no surprise he finds himself at home while riding Oregon's historic backroads. It's also said that his mission of herculean effort to find Oregon's finest fried chicken and friendliest dive bars has earned him praise of many. So if you need a recommendation, Beau's the one to ask.
What's going on, Beau?
Good to be here, guys.
Brock Dittus. He's the founder and the producer of Portland's weekly talk show, the Sprocket Podcast. Being a low-impact transportation fan, Brock's found himself finding out how far one can travel on a bicycle and how much adventure can be found. Throughout the years with his friends and his wife, he's tried to break his bike on mountain passes, gravel roads, across state lines, and finally did so in 2018. Brock enjoys sharing his experience as a dirtbag tourist and hopes to help demonstrate that you don't need to go pro to have fun, and that most solid frames will most definitely take a really good beating before they really fail. Brock, Beau, thanks for coming on the show tonight. Give us a shout out.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Right on. Well, let's just dive right in. I'm going to kind of start with a generic question. I'll go to you first, Beau. What kind of was your inspiration for your initial love of the outdoors? When did that begin?
I grew up in Kansas and did a little bit, I guess hiking and kind of the camping that you do as a kid. But it wasn't until I moved out to Oregon and really started to explore a little bit more. And being a bike commuter in Portland originally, that just kind of morphed into mountain biking when I moved to Bend, and gravel riding. I mean, there's a couple guys up there in Portland, and Brock, maybe you know him, Donnie Kolb and Gabriel Amadeus, or some of the guys that really, I think, kind of got this going. They're some of the first guys that started doing routes, and just seeing their pictures, and the idea of, oh yeah, I can travel a lot farther by bike than hiking, and I can see a lot more. And I can take an old cross bike or a hardtail mountain bike and get out there. I guess that was kind of what piqued my interest. And being here in Bend, it's one of the best places to do this, right? We've got all these old timber roads, all these old Forest Service roads. You can go all across the state. I mean, which we did just on gravel, which is fantastic. So.
Yeah, Central Oregon is an absolute epic place for any sort of gravel riding if you are into that kind of sort of thing.
Yeah,
what about you, Brock? Are you what kind of sparked your love for the outdoors in the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. I was born outside of Tacoma, Washington, and so we had easy access to Mount Rainier and all the other cool forested places out there. Always got curious by maps. Always wanted to be like, oh, if that's on a map, can I go there too? And when I met my wife, she was really interested. She had just heard about this author, Joe Kermasky, the metal cowboy, who famously toured across the country with his kids in tow. And so that got us interested in like, oh, hey, where can we go by bike? Could we do this? I was really interested in not owning a car and saving money and maybe, doing some ecological good. And so we got started both bike commuting around town, not owning a car, and then just saying, hey, can we go somewhere? So yeah, we did some initial experiments trying to figure out. We tried to see if we could get to Tillamook, and we were wet and cold, and we made some puddles in a pancake shop, and we were done. But it worked out. So yeah, got started there, and just kept on going.
Right on. There's nothing like finding a spot on the map and trying to figure out how to get there. So let's go to you, Brock, because as I mentioned earlier, you broke your bike back in 2018 after 40,000+ miles on it. What kind of bike are you riding now, and why'd you choose to go that route?
Yeah. Well, Surly makes great bikes, and their long haul trucker is kind of a standby for the people who do kind of a traditional bike touring setup. I got the disc trucker. It was kind of, I don't know, I put the question out to my friends on Facebook and Instagram and said, hey, if I don't like disc brakes, am I dumb? I don't know kind of too much about, I still don't know too much about how they work. And I've always been worried that I wouldn't be able to fix them in the field. It hasn't happened yet, and maybe it won't, but it was really nice. It replaced my my Jameis Coda, which is really not a touring frame, but it was made of steel, and it was what I turned into a touring frame until I broke it.
Awesome. Looks like Liz from our Adventure Mates wants to know real quickly how you actually broke your bike.
Okay. Well, first of all, about 30,000, 40,000 miles. I've never counted up exactly how far it was, but that bike was my everything bike. I did my work commutes when I was in town. All of our trips from 2009, the first trip down the Oregon coast into California from border to border, we did that one. And then shortly before, was it 2014, right before I got to see Tom Petty. It was actually after the Tom Petty show that I noticed my frame was starting to sag and flex in weird ways. That was when I broke the first stay and had it welded together by a friend. And then 2018, I was actually trying to do the Doyen, which is, anybody who knows Portland's Des Rondes, which is kind of a hill climb event. I was trying to do that and noticed the bike was acting weird. And then I also noticed there was spider webbing cracks just coming from the bottom bracket. It was basically irreparable.
Wow. So technically broke it twice.
I think so. Yeah. Or just kept on trying to break it. Yeah.
Right on. I love that. Getting all the use you can possibly get out of that
That's right.
frame there. What about you, Beau? What are you riding on currently? And why are you riding that bike?
I've got a Diamondback Honjo. The Diamondback came out with a gravel series, probably about three years ago. I was going to speak to what Brock was saying. Is the beauty of this is you can do this on just about any bike. Don't let gear get in the way of going out and adventure. An old cross bike. If your fork allows for it, you can put any kind of nubby tires on a road bike, even depending on the gravel. A hardtail mountain bike. The beauty is you can get out. A lot of these roads are pretty rideable, and just get out and do it. I think is the thing I think I want to stress to people as much as anything.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're all about here. Is keeping people accessible to the outdoors. Whether it's whatever bike you have is the best bike to go out and venture on. So, what about Beau for you? What's your favorite bike adventure so far?
That Oregon Outback, which we did, was great, and it was the first time any of us had actually bike packed. And for maybe people that aren't familiar with it, it's you start in Klamath Falls, down in southern Oregon, and you go straight north all the way up to the Columbia River. Yeah, you can do it as fast as, I think fast riders might do it in 3 days. They used to have kind of an unsupported renegade race where some guys would do it in, I think it was even close to 30 hours. We did it in 6 days, which was great. Had lots of time to take pictures. We did a little fishing along the way. We planned it really. It's a fun trip too, as well, because you don't have to carry a ton of food. You can plot it out where you hit a bunch of little towns that you can at least get convenience store breakfast burritos. If you're carrying your camping gear, your sleeping bags and stuff, it's nice not to have to carry every single dinner too. So.
Yeah, that ride's definitely on my bucket list. It's a hell of a one to dive right into, though.
Oh, it was great. It was great.
You went 0 to 100.
Right. And the scenery is beautiful, but the best part is all these people you meet in these little communities. That was, from the get go. Our first day on the road, we'd planned to stop at a little town called Beatty. It was maybe 40 or 50 miles in, and we're totally planning on it was frozen burritos from the convenience store because that's the only place to buy meals. And there was either a little church or a little community center where there was probably 50 cars there. And we kind of stuck our head in to see what was going on. And it was some kind of community fundraiser, like a barbecue brisket fundraiser. And we asked, hey, can we buy lunch here? And they were ecstatic to have us. They charged us. One old guy told us, he goes, you four, you look like brothers. We'll give you the family discount, $5 a plate. But it was all the we could eat, baked potatoes. They had an old, there was a cover band playing, Johnny Cash, Marty Robbins, old country songs. It was phenomenal. And everybody wanted to talk to us about the trip. Couldn't believe that we'd come from Klamath Falls and how far we were going. It was such a great way to kind of kick off the first day. And it was like that the rest of the trip. It was phenomenal.
That's awesome. Yeah, the people you meet when you're on those kind of trips is just incredible. What about you, Brock? I know we were talking briefly before we got on here kind of about one of your favorite adventures. You want to tell us a little about that?
You bet. And just to tag on to what Beau has talked about with the Outback, I'll just throw a plug out for the Sprocket podcast, which I still produce. Some of my friends with the Grilled by Bike crew went out with crazy bikes and grilled a bunch of food and did a tour. And we recorded that, or they recorded that while they were out there. So we shared that. Awesome. I want to do it someday. I still haven't done it. I suspect it would be one of my favorites too.
That's great.
I think one of my favorite tours that I've done was, like I was saying, just kind of picking a point on the map. We took Adele, my wife, and I in 2014, hopped out. That was the year that we actually moved out of our apartment. We terminated our lease, got space in a friend's garage where we rented space and threw all of our stuff in a pile. And then we rode from Oregon out to Glacier National Park and then back through northern Washington out to the Olympic National Park, the peninsula out there, and then kind of wound our way back down to Portland. That trip was full of so much, both paved and unpaved. We tried to get into the forest as much as possible because when you're in the forest, you can disperse camp for free and nobody cares. You can also disperse camp for free. Not that I'm saying you should do that on private land. That would be wrong. But that is something that can be done, but it's certainly not as relaxing if you don't know that you're allowed to be there. So national forest and public lands, there's a lot of places you can just squat down with your tent at the end of the day, purify water from a stream and feel okay about it. But yeah, just so many places that we went. We stopped by, I think in 2013, I found one of my favorite little camping spots in Gifford Pinchot up in Washington. And so we tagged back to that favorite camping spot in 2014. And again, it's just a lot of gravel riding and a lot of beautiful places.
Oh yeah. Love the Gifford Pinchot, and man, the terrain that you guys are probably going through out to Glacier and back is just gorgeous, not to mention really hilly
and steep. Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Steep.
Well, I'm going to send it over to Marshall to talk more about the Oregon Outback Trail.
So first, I'm going to pull on. So Liz Craig has a great question, so I'm going to pull her on screen and have her ask her question for us. So Liz, are you there? There, she's joining us. So hey, Liz, how are you? You're on mute.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Where are you at? Where are you asking this question from?
Outside of Bryce Canyon in Utah.
Beautiful.
I've got my parents here with me.
Hi guys, how are you? Hey, great question. We wanted to pull you on and so you could ask Brock and Beau personally. Have at it. What do you got for them?
Yeah, so I'm in the market for a new bike, and I want a bike that's light and comfortable enough to cruise around town on, but durable and versatile enough to like get off road and on gravel. My 23s on my road bike don't really do that well.
Yeah. Brock, you want to go first?
Well, I'll recommend. I had great experience with my Jamis Coda frame. Jamis makes a great touring frame called the Aurora that I really wanted to get, but I couldn't afford a new one. So the used Coda that I found, I eventually turned into an Aurora. Thousands of parts switched out over the years. I don't know if it's super light, but it's certainly it's kind of a consumer model. They say that steel is real, and steel is the sort of thing that even if somebody doesn't know how bikes work, they can still weld it back together. So if you find somebody with a torch, they can kind of stick it together for you if something breaks on the road. So it worked for me. And if you're willing to pedal steel, I know there are lighter materials. Like I know carbon has come a long ways and gotten a lot stronger over the years, and people have fewer worries about that now. Aluminum, you can't weld aluminum, but aluminum's super lightweight. There's a lot of kind of what Beau was saying. It's like you can almost do this on any bike if the wheel clearance is big enough to get you some purchase on the ground.
And just even more general, I'd say just find an older cross bike, on Facebook Marketplace or something like that. I mean, that's a bike that you can do anything. I mean, they make great commuters. You can ride down here. Most of our mountain bike trails are real flowy, cross country trails. So you can still do some mountain biking, and they're great with gravel. I think the biggest thing is how big that fork is to see how wide of a tire you can put on there. But I mean, that's what I started with, and still have my I guess my original. So
Sweet.
Yeah,
Thanks,
I always
guys.
ran 32 centimeter tires, which was I felt
Yeah.
like that was kind of the smallest you could get, and still kind of feel like you weren't going to ruin yourself.
Wipe out. Yeah.
Hey, well, thank you,
Awesome.
Liz. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, the Craig family. It's a pleasure, and
They're the big bikers, not
Yeah.
me. So they're stoked.
I'm sure there's gravel cycling mecca down there. So thanks for tuning in, and thanks for the great question.
Yeah.
Oh, and there she goes. Okay, guys, let's jump into. I got one more question from Russell Lampton. His question came across: will my biomass stove, solo stove light, a little bit of a gear question here, be sufficient for a 2 to 3 day trip in the Cascades?
Brock, go ahead. I'm not familiar with the solo stove light.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with that particular one either. I do know that when Adele and I did our West Coast trip there, it wasn't as remote, and we did very little gravel on that one. It was mostly paved roads, but we did camp without a stove the whole way down. So if you're planning a trip where you can go, from town to town, you can still pack up, your freezer burritos and that sort of thing. I think if you want to do like a kind of a backcountry thing, it really does feel great to have a stove where you can warm up some water and warm yourself, in the cool of the night, or coffee in a chilly morning and that sort of thing. I do recommend anything you do, you should probably shake it down first and give it a test. Do an overnight if you can, 24 hours out or less, and just see if it works. That way, if you do have to bail, at least it only sucks for a little bit.
Yeah, I think with a biomass stove too, it kind of depends on the terrain you're in. Depending on if you're going to be able to find sufficient fuel source easily.
Oh, we're talking about, like one that would burn wood as opposed
It's a wood burner,
to
yeah.
like a fuel canister. I gotcha. Yeah.
Well, that's a really great question, Russell. And I mean, it sounds like you guys, each year's gear is so diverse, Brock and Beau, and from your experiences, I think it's part of this recipe that you got to figure out, right? And I mean, I'm a rookie asking you guys, so.
I've always used a little propane stove, and maybe being a coffee junkie, I can't imagine not starting the day with with coffee. The biomass one, I just looked that up. That looks sweet, and it's super light.
Mm-hmm.
For 2 to 3 days. I mean, kind of like what Brock said. If you plan your trip around it, you don't have to cook any meals. I guess as much as anything, I'd use it for kind of that coffee treat in the morning.
That's great. That's great. Well, hey guys, let's transition. I think a big part of this show tonight too is storytelling. So I think you both have some amazing bike touring and packing stories. So, Beau, we're going to kick it off with you first. I think you've already kind of touched on it a little bit. Your Outback adventure, your Oregon Outback Trail adventure. Let's get a little bit more granular on that. Like, talk to us through just kind of the details. Where'd you stop each night? And kind of take us through that adventure step by step for us.
Yeah, so it was 6 days of riding, 5 nights. Tried to do about 65 miles a day, which it's not bad. You have all day to ride, right? So we took our time. We took a lot of photos. My buddy Nate Wyeth, these are the photos on the deck here, is an amazing photographer. And poor guy took a drone too. He was completely weighed down. But part of the fun for this too, these multi-day trips, is the map planning, right, Brock? I mean, I've got 2 of these benchmark Oregon atlases. I've got one at home and one at work. So whenever the mood kind of strikes me, I can kind of start plotting out, trips. And we planned it, kind of trying to figure out where our water source was, where our food source was, and where we could camp, as far as trying to stay on public lands. It was great. We went in thinking about kind of the outdoor element, and how, we got to see all these different, we got to see the high desert, and we got to see, we go through the Ochicos, and we got to see the Columbia River Plateau. But the thing that really stuck out was the people. We had one night, Prineville's the biggest town that you pass through, and we swung by the bike shop there, had some beers. Good Bike Co. Huge shout out to them. They have embraced gravel cycling, I think, as much as anybody in the state. But we were having beers, and a lady came in to get a bike fix, and she heard about our trip, and it was kind of wet that day. And she said, "Hey, I've got a ranch it's on the route. You guys are more than welcome to throw your tents up in my horse barn." Like, great. It kept that night, and I don't know, just stories like that. We met a guy outside of Antelope that gave us water, gave us bush light, and then told us some of these awesome old Rajneesh stories. And this is before the wild. This is before the documentary came out too. And so, he would have kept us there all night, but we had to get to Antelope where we were planning on camping.
Mm-hmm.
Just the people we met. It was just absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah. So, it sounds like you guys went into this thinking, all right, we're on a bike adventure, but just the culture that surrounded this adventure and the people and the towns, and it really embellished this experience that made it so memorable for you. Yeah.
Well, and I'll be honest, this is after the 2016 election, right? It felt like we were as divided as possible, maybe until this year. And so I don't know that we were apprehensive, but we were curious about what, these folks, these three guys from Bend and a dude from Brooklyn, riding up in bikes, what they were going to think in Beatty and in Fort Rock, right? And the best part of the trip was just getting to chat with all these people from parts of Oregon that we don't get to see. So.
Yeah. And so circling back to the kind of start, you grazed over it, was this Atlas map planning.
Oh yeah.
I think for those tuning in and those of us who are new to this, like, talk us through like kind of that planning process specifically around this trip, just of like on a map, where are we going?
Well, and huge props to the people that have plotted this out. So this trip in particular, bikepacking.com has it. And the guys I mentioned earlier, Donnie Colbin and Gabriel Deas, kind of put together this route. We followed that pretty close, but then, we downloaded, GPS routes, but also I took paper maps to make sure we knew where we were going. But, and then you're kind of figuring out, are there little side trips you want to do, or in water, trying to figure, making sure that there's some stretches where you might be 50, 60 miles without water, but bringing we brought a massive water filter device. Two guys carried tents, two other guys kind of carried food. One guy was carrying the photo equipment. One guy carried a really giant water filtration system.
Mm-hmm.
So, just kind of going on the map and, highlighting and circling and using Google Maps. It's the planning part is almost as much fun as the actual rides.
And so these pictures fabulous pictures by Nate here.
Yeah.
I definitely urge those listening in to check out Nate Wyeth on Instagram. He's amazing. Got some amazing photography. Yeah. You guys look like you're super fortunate to have him along for the ride, because every adventure needs a good photographer. Otherwise it never happened. Right.
Oh yeah. He makes us look good.
So each one of your bike setups is there's consistency, but then it looks like it kind of changes per person. Like, talk me through like how you guys rigged out these bikes here that we got on screen.
Yeah. So we were super fortunate. Ortlieb gave us some bikepacking gear to test out. And my buddy Lucas works for Hydro Flasks, so we had a lot of Hydro Flasks as well. I hate riding with anything on my back. So my whole goal was to put everything I could on the frame. So you'll see I'm in the blue and then the rust color jacket and the one in the middle. I take those, I don't even know what you call them. They're water bottle frames that you can kind of strap wherever, right, with the Velcro. I put those on my front fork. And then obviously I've got two cages on the frame. I've got a frame bag then. I don't know if you can kind of see it, that I loaded up with snacks. My seat post bag is where I put the tent, and then the handlebar bag, is where I roll up the sleeping bag. Probably my favorite piece of equipment though too is I think I found this at REI at an REI garage sale. It's just kind of a feeding bag that I put on my top tube so I can constantly just grab snacks. My biggest fear is going hungry on a trip, so I want to make sure I always got snacks ready to go.
Any gear by the final day that you said, oh man, I missed out on that, I should have brought that?
Well, I think if anything, like we took too many sweets. Like we were fully gelled and gummied up, and so the saving grace was when we were in Prineville, I bought a bunch of just sausage and cheese, and like that became my go-to meal for like the last 2 or 3 days. And that's become my favorite thing to always have on these trips.
Yeah. So you've mentioned the people, and I get that's a huge highlight of this trip for you. What Any other specific point on this trip that you'd say that was like stands out as the most memorable?
Man, I'd recommend anybody, if you're going to Central Oregon or coming from Portland, go to the Ochicos, kind of outside of Prineville. It was absolutely gorgeous. We climbed up into the Ochico from Prineville to this little town called Ashwood, where, I think we did 5 or 6 stream crossings. Feel like that's a really hidden part of the state that, from Bend, it's about an hour away. I'm going out there this weekend to go bikepacking. It's, I highly recommend the Ochicos for sure.
Okay. Well, that's great. So in regards to this trip, for any of those that are newish to this scene on the call, anything you'd recommend to prepare going into something like, if you want to put this on your adventure bucket list?
I'll do it. You can totally do it. I mean, take as much time as you want. 6 days is not brutal at all. And again, you can kind of plan food sources. The biggest thing is making sure you calling ahead to all these little places, especially right now. Making sure people are open, making sure people are going to be open certain times of day. But just getting out and do it. I mean, there's also plenty of places where if you had to bail out, you could. If you got to Prineville and was like, I'm done, you could go back to Bend or Portland or whatnot. It's I couldn't emphasize enough. It's totally doable, and man, it's kind of soul cleansing to get out there for 6 days and out there in the best parts of Oregon, right?
Yeah. And so it sounds like before we jump over to Brock for some storytelling, sounds like there's some scenic bikeway work in the mix. Nate has something in the works there. Tell us a little bit more about what's going on there.
Yeah, Visit Bend is put together. I just got this today and sent that to you guys. Visit Bend is put together. It's kind of similar to Oregon's scenic bikeways that Travel Oregon does. Visit Bend down here is putting together scenic gravel bikeways. And there's a phenomenal group called Dirty Free Hub that has put together a bunch of routes. I've used a lot of them and taken bits and pieces of it. But if you're down here in Bend, definitely look that up. They've got routes all over the state, all over the Pacific Northwest actually. But gravel riding is it can be as steep or not steep as you want. The gravel can be as challenging or as easy as you want. And you can see in these pictures, you actually get to talk to your buddy while you do it. You don't have to worry about cars like you do in road cycling. And if you're single, if you're doing mountain biking, it's harder to have a conversation. These trips, you get a chat for 6-7 hours while you're biking.
Well, that's fabulous, man. It's going on my bucket list. This is amazing. And the photos looking through those that you shared from Nate and crew, look like what a trip. What an amazing trip, man.
Well, and a quick add to public transportation too. Mm-hmm. Portland, we took Amtrak down there. From Portland, it's a pretty, you can take Amtrak down. You can, load your bike, stay the night in Klamath the night before, and then, you could essentially you could ride back to Portland pretty easy. So
even better. Leave your car in Portland and hop on the train, and then you ride back to your car. Even better. Well, it's a pleasure. Let's I'm gonna switch it over to Brock. So Brock, bringing you on. Let's talk through these photos. What do we got on screen? Let's chat with this one on the left here. You're walking your bike. Aren't you supposed to be riding it?
That's right. Yeah, that's the problem. It's not really it's not a bike ride there anymore, is it? I think you can see that was my older bike, and I guess those are both my older bike. And on that tour, that was 2011. And it was my wife and I had a few under our belt, and we said, hey, let's invite some friends along. So we went on that one with Aaron, who's the current co-host of the Sprocket podcast, and this family we knew who had 2 young children. I want to say they were like 5 and 3 or something like that. So it was me with, you can see the cargo trailer there. So burly cargo trailer. The back pannier on that bike is made of a bucket. People who have been around Portland and maybe some other cities have seen, you can take one of those square condiment buckets you get from a restaurant or something, and you can turn it into a nice ad hoc pannier. And then on the front, those are not hand built, I guess. I bought some old rucksack bags from Andy and Bax, the kind of used gear outfitter in Portland, and turned them into basically panniers. So yeah, a lot of homemade and kind of bootstrapped gear in that photo. It was only the second day of the trip, I think, where we had pushed out first into a national forest campsite, camped out there, and we actually bumped into a guy that my wife and I had met 2 years prior on another bike tour. And so it's kind of funny how those paths cross. But this is a classic example of kind of taking a point on the map and just saying, well, Google, tell me how to get there. And Google naturally doesn't think about how much fun you're going to have or whether it's going to be a good idea or not. It just says, here's how you do it. And so, especially back in those days, there wasn't nearly as much topographic information or street view type stuff. And so this is a road that goes up over Bohemia Saddle. It's outside of Cottage Grove. Cottage Grove is the home of this beautiful, beautiful bike trail. And I forget exactly how long it is, but you can ride out of Cottage Grove on a off-road path, beautiful, along the Row Lake or Row River rather, and the reservoir that's out there. And then when you get to the end, you just keep on going into the forest. So we found this forest campsite. We stayed the night. Next day, we're like, all right, we feel fresh. We're going to go. And we discovered that we knew it was going to be gravel, but we didn't know how steep it was going to be. And in broad sunlight, no cloud cover, very little tree cover, and really, we went through our water pretty quick. I do think, especially with the extra trailers with the two younger kids, all of our weight, we ended up, and none of us really had bikes that were built for this sort of thing. And so that was, I want to say, maybe 3 to 4 hours getting from where it turned to gravel to the top of the pass. And then riding down the pass wasn't much fun either, because once we got up there, it was that cobbly stuff that is really exciting when you have the right bike for it. But we didn't necessarily have the right bike, let alone the trailers. So we did make it. We found a great place to wild camp that night. It was kind of a dispersed campsite, so that was free. But that was also the night that several of the kids got the flu that their dad had a couple days prior. So it was a show, man. It was the worst in some ways, but it was also the best. We had some beautiful things. We all got the flu on that trip at one point or another.
So, maybe a dumb question, but would you do it again?
Oh, absolutely, in a heartbeat.
I figured that would be the response.
I do it differently. We did come through that same region. In 2015, we did a tour from California back up to Portland.
Mm-hmm.
And we discovered that there was a paved road that kind of goes parallel to this about 50 miles west. And that would have been the one to take, I think. But so it goes.
Yeah. So transition gears. So we got Cottage Grove, and then we got this photo here that's totally different scenery. Where are we at here?
That's right. Yeah, that's Eastern Washington. That's on the way to my grandma's place. That was on the 2014 tour. When we went to Glacier, we had been to Glacier National Park, and we came back through Idaho, Panhandle, and northern Washington. Really hot, really beautiful. And that picture was taken, actually, I think it was the day that all those big forest fires started in Washington. So we didn't know about it yet, but it was about to be big changes to our trip and everything. But you can see I've got the bed head. You can see I lost a lot of weight on that trip. And you can see that I've got incredible tan lines from the socks that I wore all day, every day. And that's got my more traditional setup. I got the 4 pannier Ortlieb setup. These days I roll with a handlebar bag too, but that's kind of that's what used to be kind of your standard bike touring stuff. I've never really experimented with, mostly just because I can't afford to experiment and I have stuff that works for me, but I've never really experimented with the new bikepacking type setup that Beau's got. It does seem like you could save a lot of weight and be a little more aerodynamic that way. But then most of my adventures have not really been about going fast. They've been about do I have what I need to survive for 2 months on the road? So so for me, that's kind of what's going on there.
Yeah.
That Brooks leather saddle is kind of in process too. There are a couple different models. One of them is really wide with springs. You can also get one that's much narrower, and that seat there is kind of in process of becoming one of the narrow ones over years of use and abuse.
Mm-hmm. And so on this one here, how many days in were you here? Do you remember?
I want to say that was probably 4 to 5 weeks in.
Wow.
Yeah, we spent a couple days at my grandma's place, and then we were going to go over Highway 20 and see some of the beautiful North Cascade stuff, but that was all on fire. And then Highway 2 was also on fire, so we got diverted kind of twice trying to figure out what we were going to do. But it ended up working out nicely because we did get to see the John Wayne Trail, which is kind of this gravel thing that goes out from it technically goes all the way across the state, but the rideable portion from Ellensburg to about Snoqualmie Falls or so has some incredible camping opportunities and some really great gravel and like a 2-mile tunnel or something that you can ride through. Mm-hmm. So nice relief from the heat in the summer.
Yeah. And so this next picture, it's proof. You told us earlier you broke a frame. This is, I had to bring it back on for the audience. So like this is proof. You have ridden a bike to breaking. not just parts, but like we're talking the frame. So this is
That's
pretty
right.
amazing. I think along those lines, just for those. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, you can see the fracture there. There's the fracture that's visible in this picture, and then on the other side that's not visible, there's a separate fracture going a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was pretty broken.
That takes some real miles to do that.
You can't say I didn't try.
So I think for those tuning in, you have countless years of bikepacking experience. You're part of the Sprocket podcast. Biking is really life for you and your family. And just before the call, you were tuning in to carrying now your family on trailer. Like you really live this bike life. What would be, for someone tuning in, what would you say is would be your first recommended favorite bikepacking trip to somebody who's new to this space?
Well, I think one thing that I didn't discover, it was kind of on my list of things to try for years, and I never quite got around to it. But people remember Silver Star Mountain maybe is the one that you can see from Portland over on the Washington side. It's kind of the big peak. There's some beautiful views from the top. And when I was younger, I would always go up there with friends. We'd go up, at sunset and then hike up under the moonlight, sleep on top, and watch the sunrise the next morning. And so I always wondered if that was possible to do by bike. You could do it in a longer day, depending on how far you want to ride if you're coming from Portland, but there's also a great transit connection. So if you hop a couple of buses, you can get yourself dropped off in Battleground, Washington. And you can ride up on some of the forest roads. I think it's Washington's DNR, the state forest lands, that manages most of that, but they've got some gravel roads that go up to the hiking trailhead. So you can ride up the hill, stash your bike in the bushes. I always brought a lock and a cable just in case somebody had ideas, but it was also kind of hidden there behind stuff, not visible from the roadway. But then from there, we'd hike up to the top and like I did when I was younger, just roll out the sleeping bag. So yeah, that's a great one. You can cruise down a different route. You can pop out in Washougal and catch another bus home. So it's certainly worth a try if it's something that's interesting to you. That's a way to do it without a car. And it's really kind of a neat adventure that's all pretty accessible. And, it's not too far away, so your friends can bail you out if it goes poorly.
I love it. I love it. Local and again, no car there as well too. So, okay, now let's take it for those tuning in tonight. Like, you got a year under your belt of bike tour, and you've got a couple tours, couple multi-days. What's your favorite next recommendation of a let's say a week to a couple weeks of a tour? Where would you go next?
I would definitely say kind of similar areas. Again, Gifford Pinchot, there's a great tour that my wife and I did where we rode from North Bonneville, where we've got some friends, and we would go out and crash there a lot. We just kind of went up into the woods, like from Carson, Washington, and north. There's a great access up to there. Indian Heaven Wilderness is up there, and you can't bike in the actual wilderness, but there's a lot of gravel roads around it. And that's another way that, you can catch buses, I think, to your beginning point there if you need to. And there's some great gravel out there. That was probably some of the first places that my wife and I kind of tested our bikes to see, like, well, how much gravel can we do? Goose Lake is a beautiful campground, beautiful place. It's also really close to, there's an enormous lava flow down there that's real kind of mysterious. And they say that if you get in there, there's enough magnetism in the rocks that compasses don't work and whatnot. So
wow,
really putting yourself, they say that's where, if you believe the Sasquatch is a possibility, that's where it might be hiding out.
Yeah. And where's next for you? You got any fun ones planned for this summer?
Well, this summer we're kind of getting used to having the kid around, so we don't have a huge bike trip planned right now, but I certainly want to take little overnights with him, get him used to his sleeping bag because he still isn't quite sure what that's all about. He did great, a year ago, and now that he's older, he thinks he's wiser and he doesn't like it anymore. So we got to figure out how to get him to the next stage of camping. But certainly, yeah, I mean, there are things I'd like to do. I want to figure out exactly how much is possible with a family in tow, and figuring out, like, hey, can we drag you into the woods and still have a good time? He loves sticks, he loves rocks, and so I think it's going to be a good thing for him.
How much longer until you got the little one on a bike?
Yeah, I mean, he's in the trailer now, and so on his own, that's a good question. As soon as he's able to stay upright, we'll try it out.
That's awesome. Well, hey, it's an absolute pleasure, man. We could talk all night about stories, and I sincerely urge those on tuning in to reach directly out to you on. We got your Instagram handle later, and then we'll can directly connect with you for all the different adventure stories you have, and same with you, Beau. But I want to turn it back over to Zan. Zan's going to get into a little bit more for those beginners on the call, a little bit around the education of this scene and what that looks like, and any recommendations you guys got. So, Zan, take it away.
Yeah, let's kind of talk some education here, get people a little more adept to getting out there on their bikes. So this one's for both of you. I'll start with you, Beau. You both are inspirations to those tuning in tonight, and many of us have little to no gravel cycling bike touring experience, definitely not to the extent that you guys do. Do you have any sort of recommendations for novices or anyone who's starting to kind of get into the bike packing realm and bike touring realm?
Get a trip under your belt, right? I mean, even if it's you're just biking 20 miles outside, from your doorstep, and there's something pretty cool and powerful about just riding from your front door too. But yeah, just get that first trip in, and that's pretty empowering, right? The first time you go out and you're like, oh yeah, I can carry whatever gear I need, sleeping bag or tent, and I figured out the food, and then just take it from there. It's not even baby steps. It's just kind of, getting those first experiences and then building off those would be, I guess, my biggest point.
Yeah, get those first night out jitters kind of over with. What about you, Brock? Any sort of other recommendations you have for anyone looking to try this out, or any ways for them to get into it?
I don't want to be too much of a downer too quick, but I do think you have to think about mechanical failures and what you're going to do. Probably the most common thing most people are going to encounter first is a flat tire. And nobody likes flat tires, but you should have the tools and the experience to be able to repair that on the road. Because there are times when you feel like calling for a bailout, but you may not have to if you can get it fixed. So I always think prevention is kind of the best way to avoid that. I have super thick tires. I use the Schwalbe Marathon Plus, and that just means that there's a lot more. There's a Kevlar belt, and there's a lot of rubber on that tire. And then I hate flat tires so much, and I'm I guess I'm not super worried about weight, and so I got the thickest tubes I could get, kind of a thorn-proof tube that's just, I think it's an extra 1/4 inch of rubber or something. So it's certainly not what you would use if you were trying to set records and go fast. But if really your highest priority, like mine, is just not getting a flat, I'd say invest into a little more expensive gear on your tires and tubes, and that'll keep you from some stuff later on.
And be confident in being able to change a flat, in the field. I mean, that's if you don't have much of a mechanical background, and I don't at all, but I feel I can change a flat, and I feel good about going on trips with that being pretty much minimal mechanical knowledge.
Yeah, that's the most likely thing that's going to happen. I can tell you, I blow quite a few tires, and it's never a fun thing, but it's definitely good to be able to do it efficiently. Beau, this one's for you here. So your Oregon Outback Tour was your first bike tour, which obviously by no means is an easy way to kind of get into this. Did you learn anything from that trip about kind of what you would do differently the next time?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody, first time you do it, I overpacked. Like I definitely didn't need to bring Lonesome Dove with me, which I did, and we met our wives in Prineville for dinner one night, and I unloaded that, I think that water. I guess I keep going back to water because we ran out of water at one point, and it led to a great story in Busch Lights. But being able to knock on somebody's door, just trying to figure out those water sources as much as anything. I'd highlight again, I think I had a better experience because I didn't have anything on my back. Trying to be comfortable, right? Don't think about land speed records, but make sure your setup is rideable and comfortable. I don't want to speak for Nate, our photographer, but I think he probably would have taken less gear for sure. I'd say one other thing too, our first trip was very, I don't want to say programmed, but we knew exactly where we were trying to go each night, right? And one of the last trips I did was more of, hey, we want to be in this general vicinity by the time the sun sets. And it was much more meandering. And that's really fun too, just because you feel like you can explore and, I don't know, maybe get off the grid a little bit more. And I think some people are more comfortable with that, A to B to C to D, and other people are going to be more comfortable with just kind of meandering and knowing that, oh, there's a national forest up there that I can camp in, or open ground. So I guess kind of play around with that, whatever pre-planning you're most comfortable with.
Yeah, definitely a lot of ways to do it. It's never really fun to go miles on end with a pack on your back, though.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would bring next time that you didn't bring with you?
Man.
Besides extra water?
More sausage and cheese. I feel like I
yeah.
share that with everybody.
less sweets, more savory stuff.
More sausage and cheese. I'm trying to think. It's really nice to have a nice beer at the end of every day. Trying to plot out. I feel like half of our trips are trying to figure out which dive bar we can also hit up at the end of the day. It's just getting out there and kind of figuring out what your comfort level is and what your, I don't know, what you want out of that trip, right?
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure you're also still kind of refining the equipment that you choose to take or choose not to take.
Yeah, we did a little bit of fishing with some of those. You see some of those Tonkara rods that break down. None of us are very good fishermen, so we probably could have done without that. But it was a cool idea at the time, Try to go. I don't know, maybe go as minimal as possible the first couple times, and see what you need.
Yeah, the rod's not heavy either, so if you're into fishing, why not just bring it? Might find a nice, cool little lake. What about you, Brock? So thousands and thousands of miles put on bikes over the years, long bike tours to long bike days. Could you tell us kind of a little bit about like the gear that you typically carry on a multi-day tour, mainly like the essentials?
Yeah. I mean, you've got it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So you got to kind of build off of what'll keep you alive first, and then kind of what'll make you comfortable after that. So you don't need a tent. We've always carried one just because it's nice to be indoors, I guess, even if you're outdoors sometimes. So particularly in rain, I think it's easier to weather a rainy night, or if you have to delay your departure or something due to rain, a tent is nice. So we've had right now, I think we're running an REI family size, which is the biggest tent we've ever had. For years, we had, I want to say it was the Optic 2.5 from Mountain Hardware. That was a pretty good tent, and it worked out pretty well for us. I've had terrible luck with inflatable sleeping pads. Sleeping on the ground, it's a great idea because you can roll your pad up and store it really compactly, but I've just never been able to keep one inflated. And so I gave up on those a couple of years back. I've been using the foldable foam pad, and that works really well for me. I know it's not as much support as you could get from, I know Big Agnes makes a great pad, and I might have to give it a try again someday. But the foldable foam on the ground is really, I think, what was just enough for me to feel comfortable and still pretty lightweight. So yeah. And then after that, your food, I think compact food and a cook set. We talked about stoves earlier. We've used the jet boil as a pretty popular one. It doesn't take any sort of fire. You can light it with a lighter if you need to, but yeah, it's got its own igniter, and you can boil water real quickly. We're not super fancy with food, but mashed potatoes from Idahoan, one of those with a can of baked beans or pork and beans or what have you. Those all are pretty standbys. And then ramen, if you still need some energy. Ramen is pretty cheap, it's pretty compact, and it's easy to make with some warm water. So those are some of the essentials, and that has more to do with just what you do on the campsite as opposed to on the bike. I also can't recommend enough like a multi-tool. For a bike, you're going to need a couple of bike-specific tools, a couple of hex heads for all the things that'll rattle loose, but also a Leatherman, particularly with a set of little needle nose pliers. Those little wires that they fall out of truck tire belting, and they just lay on the road waiting for your tire. And even the best of tires, like the ones that I use, still get those tire punctures with the tiny wires from time to time. And a needle nose plier is really great for pulling those out. The other thing that helps me combat the flats is if you get this really, really bad gouge in your tire, sometimes you can boot that up with a dollar bill. Dollar bills are made of cotton. They're pretty resilient, and you can fold them up and kind of put a barrier between the road and your tube with that dollar bill. They usually can't be spent afterwards. I've had one in my tire for years, and it's pretty worn out by the time you get done. Still legal tender, but it may not be recognized as such.
Wow, what an interesting trick. I actually have ran into the tire wires before, for sure. Those are never fun, and they're super hard to find.
And they're everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
The back pocket dollar bill. Wow. Never.
Right.
That is some years of experience there. Well done, Brock.
Brock, also, so Justin Rakely asked, he said that you mentioned Maslow's, and since he's a professional coach, he's pretty familiar with the concept for kids and adults, and he was wondering what you do outside, off the bike, like outside for your day job. And
yeah, I do a lot of reading, but I work in government policy, so there's a lot of reading to be done.
Awesome. And then real quickly too, what's the one thing that you won't leave home without? I know we talked about changing tires and everything. Obviously that's a big issue. Yeah, if you left home and you didn't have this, and you would go back for it.
Honestly, the spare battery. I try not to depend on the phone too much, but also there are times when you print out your Google directions and it just says, turn left on unnamed road, and there's no picture, there's nothing. It can be really helpful these days to have all the geolocation and saved maps and that sort of thing. A spare battery is really helpful, and then if like me, you use your phone to also track your progress and count your calories, that's something you can do there too. Because it's not that it didn't happen, but it's a lot harder to prove it, and it's a lot harder to brag about it if you don't have that GPS track. So yeah, and the battery that I've got, it's got a built-in flashlight too, so it two birds, one stone.
Yeah, definitely ran into the lose your phone battery. Good luck. Luckily, you're in somewhere where you can figure your way out. Marshall, I'm going to give it over to you here for a quick question before we get to our closing segment.
Yeah. Hey guys, I want to circle back because I'm a rookie. I'm a novice. I'm learning from you as I get the opportunity to ask all the questions. But before the bike even leaves your house on preparing for a multi-day tour, there's got to be some mechanical work that you're prepping for there. What do you kind of do in the shop before you hit the road?
Man, again, I'm not a mechanic at all or supposed to be, but I make sure I lube up my, I clean my chain, as much as anything. Tonight, I'm going through and just making sure everything is as true as possible on the bike that I'm going to ride. Brock said, prevention's the biggest thing. I'm not very good fixing my bike in my garage, let alone, out in the field. But, making sure that your tires go, making sure that there's nothing in there that, could be causing a flat before you even get going. I've run tubeless, which seems to help and has decreased the flats since I did that. But I guess just kind of, I guess that's the biggest thing for me is before heading out. And then making sure the pack setup is comfortable, right? Making sure that you don't have one of your panniers or one of your bags isn't rubbing up against something. You kind of giving that, the nice little test run around the block that it feels comfortable, it's light enough, and nothing's going to break anything else on your bike.
That's great, Beau. Yeah. How about you, Brock?
Maslow's law to Murphy's law, right? You got to assume that everything that can go wrong will at some point. So if you are up against your limits of what you can do, like I can lube a chain all right, I can tighten some bolts, but I'm terrible when it comes to telling how old my chain is, how worn out my cables are, that sort of thing. I've had cables snap, I've had chains break, and learning how to fix a chain is kind of exciting and kind of cool. It's very empowering once you figure out how to do it. It's also very precise and easy to screw up because I've done it. But I think it's important if you haven't had your bike to the shop, make sure that you take it into a mechanic you trust and have them go over it. Because if it's newer, those failure points aren't going to show up as quickly. I always used to go into back when Velo Cult was around in Portland. That was my shop of choice. And every time I came in, Sky would look at me and say, "Well, did you destroy some more parts?" I'd say, "Yep. Can you replace them?" So it's good to have somebody in your corner that way.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Beau.
Oh, I was just going to add, I think you guys asked the one thing you wouldn't leave without. I take Crocs with me on every single trip now, because the first thing you want to do when you get off the bike is just you want to get out of your bike shoes or whatever you've been wearing and the Crocs are the greatest thing ever for camping or bike packing trips. So, or fake Crocs from Amazon or wherever.
That's awesome.
They cover the tan lines.
And then as far so flats, number one fix that you're gonna have to deal with on the road. Is there any other more common-ish mechanical errors that you guys have run into that you kind of had to repair out there in the wild?
I've run into some of the cable stuff, like if you aren't able to shift. I was lucky that we were close to Prineville, and there's a bike shop there. Spokes, knowing how to either fix the spoke or get by with a broken spoke, I think is another common, especially the times I've run into that is when mixed in some single track, and putting more pressure, and I guess maybe more things that could possibly stick into those spokes.
Yeah, the spoke broke is one of those things that seems like it's world ending, and it could be depending on how things work out. But one of my proudest moments was in 2012 when we were bicycling towards Colorado. We were in Idaho and losing some spoke strength, and when it popped out, I pulled out the replacement spoke that I've been carrying all those years, and I thought, well, now's where I find out if I actually know how to do it or not. And depending on how bad it is, if it's just a popped spoke, you can usually put that thing back in. It's something you want to do some education on how it works before you actually are in the moment. Kind of like tire chains for snow on your car. Like, you don't want to be out there freezing when you're trying to figure out how they work. But it's really nice to put something on and realize, oh, this is how I can tension it back so that it'll work. And with a lot of those, kind of like, if you're not a pro mechanic yourself, at some point you'll need to stop at a shop somewhere along the route and have someone kind of dial it back in for you. But knowing enough to get it into the position where like you're able to continue is really, really empowering and really nice.
Mm-hmm. Those are great. Yeah, no, I personally, I've had 3 spokes break in my riding career, my road cycling career. And one time was able to take some electrical tape and just kind of tape it back on until I could get to a shop that could fix it. But I never had carried an extra spoke, and never really knew the process until I got to the shop and finally said, I need to learn this. I need to know how to retrue this. So it's that's a common one, and it's no joke. Props to you, Brock. It's an impressive one to figure out.
Well, anybody can do it. If they just take the time to kind of figure out some of the theory.
Yeah. Hey guys, I want to transition gears a little bit more of a sensitive but real topic for the time being, and kind of the current state. So, with respect to climate change and the necessary actions being taken to fight equality, abolish racism, and celebrate diversity. Can you guys speak a little bit to, like, just in the cycling community, and something I think the outdoor industry as a whole kind of struggles with in diversity, kind of some actions that that the cycling community can take that from your guys' POV on to help aid the causes that are currently surrounding us and have been surrounding us for many years now. So Brock, I'll kick it over to you first. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, I was talking with you guys before we went public here about Chad Brown and Soul River. Chad wrote a really incredible article about his experience as a black man and a fly fisherman, and kind of just how welcome he's been in some places and how unwelcome he's been in others, and kind of what that feels like. It's easy for me as a white man to take for granted the fact that it's really easy for me to go out in the woods and feel comfortable there. But I think it's really important to recognize that that's not everybody's experience. And so certainly listening to what people are saying, that was the thing that Chad said was, I need you to hear me. I need you to see me where I am. And I think there's a lot that we can do. I'm still learning about that. But I think a lot of us are also kind of afraid that we're going to make the wrong move. We're going to say the wrong thing. And especially, I was reading the other day, when we're in a kind of a cancel culture motif as well, it's easy to assume that, if I say the wrong thing, I could say one thing and it's going to tank me forever. Obviously, we have to be careful with our words, but there's also a big piece of learning how to deal with race and privilege and kind of how it affects all parts of our lives. It's really important to go out and accept some non-closure and accept that you're going to make some mistakes, and it's that's part of the process of working towards a better world. And so we can't let our fear of kind of knowing how to talk about it or what to do keep us from doing something about it. My biggest thing right now is just knowing that as a person with privilege, as a person who has some money in the bank, I'm making more than it takes to pay my bills. I find it's really important to be able to share some of that with, like Soul River, for example, is a nonprofit. So that's one thing you can do. But just making sure that money talks, money is power. And if you've got money to give, you can put that towards any number of nonprofit causes that are working to make sure that everybody has equitable access.
Yeah. How about you, Beau?
I think this is something we've all been thinking about, right? And I think what Brock said a little bit is it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay we might have some uncomfortable conversations, right? We might say the wrong thing. I think the biggest thing for me is access, right? It is inviting, what all got us, into the outdoors is somebody inviting us along on a trip and trying to bring more people of color into the outdoors, whether that's through different organizations, whether that's through buddies, whether maybe it's not I think the conversation I've had a lot is I don't have a lot of friends of color. How do I expand my friend circle so that I am inviting people? I am inviting people out into the outdoors and kind of all across the board. So yeah, I don't have a hard answer. I ride with a team down here, Boneyard Cycling. How do we make sure that that cycling team doesn't all look like us right? Is that through youth organizations? Is that donated to certain causes? And I guess just having those conversations and reaching out to different communities. So no good answer, I guess, from me. Just trying to just trying to figure out where do we make those connections and how do we get more diverse communities out into the outdoors. And I think what Brock said too is realizing that white privilege. I'd never even thought about. I always feel safe when I go on a jog, right? I've always felt safe on a bike ride. I've always felt safe on national forest, or I've always felt safe walking into a bike shop that I don't know and starting chatting with people. And I think it's realizing that that's not everybody's experience, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And again, I appreciate you guys. And I think our contribution here on the lab is just to continue to have the conversation. And Brock, Beau, I appreciate you guys. It's an uncomfortable conversation, and rightfully so, and one that we need to continue to have. And I appreciate it big time. So we'll look forward to following you guys as you begin to figure out how you want to address helping this cause of improving diversity in the outdoors. I think especially in our world, it's definitely a white privileged space, and it's very white dominant, and more people the better. Come one, come all. We welcome everybody. So
could I add just one more thing on kind of that subject, is thinking
Please.
about, like, there are people probably listening from lots of different places.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to think about this issue if it's something that hits you every day, but it's also easy to not think about if you live in a community that's predominantly white well, I guess the most important thing in my mind is just that we all live where we live, and each of us has the opportunity to speak up for people who might not have the privileges we do, particularly if you're listening and you're somewhere that's a predominantly white space in rural America. That's the place that's the least welcoming, I think, just in kind of assumptions of what can happen or what can go wrong if you don't carry the privilege. And so I think it's important to think about what can we do in the spaces we are to be inviting and to offer the invitation to say, this is a safe space for you.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for answering that one. And we're going to continue to talk about it, and we're going to continue to raise it up at the top to continue to speak about what
guys, I think there's a question. And I'm looking at it. It looks like from Karen, right? That I think would be worth addressing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's coming from Karen. So I'll read it verbatim for Karen. So I think it speaks to this panel in itself, and it's spot on. And we are all white males, and it speaks a lot to the diversity of the outdoors. and where it lacks. And I think it's something that I'll speak for Zan and I in the lab. Like we have had conversations on every single one of our meetings together as a family, as an Outdoor Adventure Lab family, of addressing of how can we contribute to the cause and continue to spread diversity and promote diversity and welcome new people into the outdoors. And I think it's for us, it's continuing this conversation, asking experts like yourself, what are you doing and how are you doing it, and what are your thoughts, and having those conversations that we otherwise wouldn't be addressing because of our white privilege and things that we take for granted. And so Karen, we appreciate the comment. Thank you. Feel free to reach out to any of us. We would love to speak with you in person over a Zoom call as well. And thank you very much for that feedback as well. So Brock, Beau, anything else on that topic before I hand it back over to Zan to take us home?
No.
Just
Everybody to love the outdoors.
one more.
We want everybody to feel safe and enjoy the outdoors as much as we've gotten out of it, right?
Yeah, I think the other key that can't be overstated enough is that we have to be careful. I have to be careful as a white guy not to ask my friends of color to do the emotional lifting for me. Like, there's a lot of ways to learn about experiences without saying, hey, relive your trauma for me. There's a lot of sensitivity that I have to think about, and I have to be careful to make sure that I can educate myself without putting somebody who's already experienced a lot of emotional difficulty through it again. So yeah.
And I'll add something real quick too. As a guy that does digital content for a living, that does freelance and writes articles, I think it's really important to show representation, right? In magazine articles or ads that I'm doing for down here in Bend. I think that's a big piece of it, and we need to do a lot better job than we have.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys. Appreciate it. And Karen, great comment. Like we said, I think for anybody who's tuning in tonight, we're a family here at the lab, and we welcome all, and we're here to listen, and we're here to continue to converse. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Zan for a final few questions and to close us out for the night.
Right on. Yeah, I appreciate you guys for sharing your words and input regarding that. It's definitely important to keep the conversation going to increase and grow inclusivity and diversity in the outdoors and in the world as a whole. So we kind of touched on this, but I kind of want to come back to it for anyone who tuned in late. Summer's here, and bike touring and just adventures in general are kind of on our minds. So what do you guys have up next that's planned for maybe this summer or this fall, or maybe even next summer once things kind of open up a bit?
Brock, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, well, one thing that I've never done, and this isn't necessarily gravel, but it's outside of Eugene and over to Sisters, there's that piece of highway that goes up over the Cascades. There's the observatory and the lava field up at the top. And that's open to bicycles before they open it to vehicles most years. I forget what happened. I know this year's been different with the COVID-19 situation, so I forget what they did that time around, but I've always wanted to get out there and do that. There's a lovely park in Sisters, Oregon that accepts hiker-biker folks, and it's a great it would be a great overnight to go over the pass one day and camp out and then go back over the pass again. So again, with my son younger and in tow, somehow I'd love to get him into that and share that place with him too. So that's probably one of the next ones. Also, there's a bunch of gravel roads just I'm not too far in Salem outside the Willamette National Forest, and there's a bunch of gravel roads out there to be explored too.
You're referring to the McKenzie Pass?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, we actually just did that last weekend. It's awesome. It was a bit wet and cold, but we got it right before the cars came.
I was on there Sunday too. I might have seen you guys, and I got on for the first part of it from Sisters.
We were up there Saturday. It was a little colder than Sunday.
A big shout out as far as if you end up in Sisters, Eurosports is a great bike shop there that also has beer and food carts as part of their in their shop, and it's a phenomenal place to talk bikes and get a beer and a great piece of pizza, and tacos. So
Yeah. Sister's Coffee Company too.
yeah.
Good
Oh
stuff.
yeah, they're good. What about you, Beau? Anything planned for the future?
This weekend, actually, me and a buddy, Lucas, who's done a lot of these photos with me, we're going out to the Ochicos, and we're that Dirty Free Hub website that the people that kind of put together routes. We're playing around with some of those. We're going to camp out at Walton Lake. It's kind of in between Prineville and Mitchell. Mitchell's got a great little biker hostel. Unfortunately, it's rented out this weekend to a whole family. So we're going to ride up to Mitchell and probably have like a milkshake or a burger or whatever for lunch, and then head back to Walton, and then do a Big Summit Prairie, kind of right there in the Ochicos. Yeah, it's kind of our wives kind of gave us permission to take a couple days off before Father's Day, so gonna get that in.
Awesome. Well, that sounds like it's going to be pretty fun. I know what you were telling us a little bit more about that a little earlier.
Yeah, should be gorgeous, and I think a lot of spring wildflowers is what we're hoping for too. So.
Ooh, yeah, especially with kind of that later spring. It was pretty cold, yeah. So hopefully they're in full bloom. For all our listeners and viewers tonight, how can people get in touch with you guys for further questions or any sort of information, or just to follow along in your guys' adventures?
Yeah, my Instagram handle, Brockman, and it's on Twitter too. I guess you're not supposed to post a lot of pictures to Twitter, but sorry, there it is. But yeah, that, and then occasionally I'll pop up on the Sprocket Podcast. So thesprocketpodcast.com. That's our kind of catch-all. Again, it's great conversations about bicycle travel, but also about urban bicycling and simpler living and transit and those sorts of things.
Yeah, Instagram is probably as good as any. Hopefully, I've got some more freelance articles that are coming up that hit up on some of the bike packing. Love to do a Washington, border to border trip there as well for somebody soon. But yeah, and shoot out, man, love talking bikes. Love hearing about new trips, or if anybody needs help getting into it's a great way to see your state. So.
Yeah, got that right. Definitely a great way to see the country. So before we actually sign off here, since this is the end of our show, I want to have you guys, do you have any sort of words of encouragement for our audience about bike touring and, why someone who maybe hasn't done it but is thinking about it, why they should get out and start adventuring on their bike on their own? I'll start with you, Beau.
Yeah, I mean, you see more on a bike, right? And you take it all in so much better than you would in a car. The McKenzie Pass, perfect example. We biked that this weekend, and I've driven that multiple times. I've got kids, and we always take family up there to see the D-Ride Observatory, and it just blew me away how much of it felt new. Because I'm going really slow on the way up, especially from the west side, but. It's a whole new way to kind of see areas that maybe you're fairly familiar with. You're just going to take it in and appreciate your surroundings so much more. It's a little bit like when you get on a river that you've walked along for years, and you get on the river and it's a totally different perspective. I feel like bikepacking is kind of similar in that regard.
Absolutely. Yeah. The small details that you notice, either on roads that you've been on before, or just like you're outside and you're in the environment that you're passing through in a way that you're not when you're driving. And so to me, that's one of the things I love the most. That and creating space and time just for your own head. There's I think a lot of need for that for everybody, and not everybody gets that. And so that's one of the reasons I think that it's important that everybody has access to the outdoors in a way that allows them to kind of clear their head and do some of that mental processing. Time spent with, I always take a classic novel that I, skipped or didn't read in high school, and I'll read that on the trip when I'm camped out. So time and space, it's there.
Yeah. And just like you said, you're there with the elements. And that's kind of one of my favorite parts about cycling is you get to move at a little bit of faster pace, but you still get to experience everything. It's not like sitting in a nice hot box car looking out at the world. Well, That's our show, guys. Thank you, Brock and Beau, for coming out to our show, sharing your stories, your insight and experience with us. Your guys' passion for cycling and bike touring is inspiring and definitely has me itching to hop on my bike. That's the end of this episode. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button below so you never miss an episode. We love hearing from our audience, so if you have feedback, would like to discuss these topics further, or if you or someone you know would be a good future guest, please let us know. Until next time, remember, adventure is better together.